In today's show, we're talking about the Houston Rockets. This is a very different team to what it was last season. There are a lot of questions to be answered. So, Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we are available on all platforms. So, we're here to talk Houston Rockets. Before we do that, week 2 of entry into the FBI LOFB Fantasy Basketball World Cup. It is in the show notes. It is in the description. You would have already received word if you made it through the first round. So, if you didn't get that information, jump in this one. Get an application going. The questions aren't that hard. We've got 144 spots in that league to give away. $20 entry fee, 9 category league, 48 divisions of 12 team leagues. Now, let's talk Houston Rockets. After some technical difficulties you didn't see, I am now here with Jackson Gatlin of the Locked On Rockets podcast. Jackson, welcome back to the show. We got it going.
Very excited to be here, Josh. Very excited to talk a little Houston Rockets basketball with you. We've got an exciting season. It's the first time in a couple of years where we've been able to say it should be an exciting season for the Houston Rockets. There's a lot of cautious optimism within this fan base currently.
Well, that was coming in super loud on my end. I don't know what was going on there. Well, I think maybe you fixed the audio stuff. I don't know. We'll find out. Hopefully everything's all right. Something happened. I opened up the computer overnight and weird stuff was going on and Google Meets wasn't working. We moved to Zoom and now there's volumes are all over the place. So I hope that this is not a harbinger for how when things change, things go wrong, Jackson, because it is a very, very different season coming up for the Houston Rockets with all of their moves in the offseason, some praised, some heavily criticized, some not coming to fruition. There's a lot to talk about, and we are just going to start by having a look at actually what went on in terms of the moves, because these are the guys that came in. Fred VanVleet, Dillon Brooks, Amen Thompson in the draft, Cam Whitmore in the draft, Jock Landale, who suffered a pretty nasty ankle sprain yesterday, Jeff Green, Aaron Holiday, and they lose KJ Martin, Usman Garuba, Josh Christopher, Daishan Nix, Frank Kaminsky, Bobo Marjanovic, Ty Washington's gone. And when you look at that list, Jackson, it is really, really easy because you just look at it and go, well, they clearly got better. Like, there's no debating that. When you look at the ins and outs, they clearly got better. But I guess the debate around the Rockets has been, did they need to? Like, is this better? Like, yes, they're better for this season, but does it mean that they are going to be able to push their ceiling as high as possible in 3 years' time, in 4 years' time?
Yeah, I think absolutely, because you look at where the Rockets were at, they've consistently talked about being in phase 1 of the rebuild over these last 2 to 3 years when they decided they made the choice to bottom out in the aftermath of the James Harden exodus. They tried for like a moment there for like half a season to be competitive with John Wall and Victor Oladipo and Christian Wood, and then that thing got derailed so quickly. So they bottomed out. They knew they were going to be bad for a few seasons, and I don't think anybody within the Rockets organization, anybody covering the team, shouldn't be looking at VanVleet and Dillon Brooks as guys who are going to be here the next time this team is hopefully trying to win championships. These are guys that have been brought in, established veteran presences who have been brought in to help bridge the gap from where this young core is right now and where they want to be in a few years. And when you look at the way that those contracts were structured, Dillon Brooks, it's the 3-year deal, but that 3rd year is a team option, so they can cut bait after just 2 seasons with him. He becomes an expiring contract, a pretty massive expiring contract as early as next season. Dillon Brooks, that contract's a little bit uglier to stomach. 4 years, $86 million after all the incentives and stuff baked in. But he's still on the younger end of things. And honestly, that's not necessarily a contract where you look at it and you're like, okay, he has to be the starter. Maybe he's in a role where, 2 or 3 years from now, if Tari Eason's ready to take over the starting role or Cam Whitmore comes along and progresses nicely, then maybe one of those guys comes in and takes the reins at the starting 3 spot. But the moves that they made this offseason made them a significantly better team, and then they're also banking on a lot of internal growth from guys like Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., and Tari Eason to take them where they want to go this next season.
Yeah, look, I think most people would look at this and Dillon Brooks cops a lot of shit because honestly he deserves it. He's a really bad, and not even a bad offensive player. Like Isaac Okoro is a bad offensive player. Dillon Brooks is a negative offensive player, and they're different things because he takes stuff off the table. And while I did praise a little bit of Dillon Brooks last season because he did really scale his usage back when playing with better players, it still rears its ugly head at times. And the worry I have with the Brooks contract is that knowing Brooks's mentality, I don't know him, but knowing what I've seen of him and hear from him and all that sort of thing, is that like he comes in and goes, well, look what they paid me. Like they actually want me to be a guy that takes a lot of shots. They paid me $23 million, $86 million over 4 years. They believe in me. They want me to be the number one guy, and that level of contract empowers him rather than humbling him after the stuff that went on in the playoffs. So look, hey, you're taking a 1 year mid-level exception deal. Like prove it, see how you go, pull your head in, do your defensive thing. He's gonna be like, hey, look at me. It all worked. Everyone loves what I did. And he has that level of, maybe it's external delusion where he just projects that, but some of the shot attempts and the way he plays on court would reflect that maybe sometimes self-awareness on the offensive end isn't his greatest strength.
Yeah, I think his role is easily one of the bigger question marks going into the Rocket season, and how basically what the organization wants out of him, right? I struggle to think of a world where the Rockets sat down in their free agency, meeting pitch with him. And obviously we know that all these deals are decided well before the actual start of free agency. I struggle to imagine a world where the Rockets were sitting there going over their options for free agency and thinking, you know what, we really want to bring Dillon Brooks in and we want to give him $80 million over 4 years so that he can be like our second or third option. It's very clear that he is an all-NBA caliber defender. He can make his mark on that side of the basketball court. He is a very polarizing force, but he has years of leadership. When you talk to the guys in Memphis that have covered Dillon Brooks, they talk about the fact that he has been the heart and soul of that team. The players talk about him being the heart and soul of that team. He's very much cut from that same cloth as like a Draymond Green or a Patrick Beverley or a Marcus Smart. And all of those guys also have varying degrees of effectiveness offensively at times, right? I think with Dillon Brooks, understanding his role and him being able to make his impact on the defensive end while minimizing some of the mistakes or bad decisions offensively is going to be, kind of the issue with him, I guess, moving forward with this Rockets team, whether or not he'll be a guy that you look at his contract and you think, oh, wow, this is a steal, right? All-NBA caliber defender. He's teaching these young guys like Jabari and Tari how to be successful, how to be good veteran players, or how to be good, impactful, winning players. Or is he out there, averaging the second most field goal attempts on the team? Because that's not the role that he should have. Maybe there's a world where he can have a bigger role offensively. And I don't mean that in the sense of like taking more shots, but when I was talking with DeMichael Cole from Locked On Grizzlies about this, he mentioned that Dillon Brooks is a shot creator in his mind. He's a guy that can put the ball on the floor a little bit. He can get to certain spots on the floor and create for himself or create for his teammates. It's just a difference whether he's actually a shot maker in those moments when he decides to actually pull up. The Grizzlies were apparently 18-2 when Dillon Brooks shot greater than 50% from the floor. Now, obviously, there were plenty of games that didn't happen, but when Dillon Brooks does shoot the ball well, the Grizzlies were just dominating opposing teams.
Let me phrase that a different. I don't want to harp on Dillon Brooks too much, but to me, he's the key piece of this whole team. But yeah, he's 18-2 and he shoots 50%. But were they 18-2 because he shot 50%, or were they 18-2 because he didn't shoot 30%? And they might sound the same thing. I don't think they are, because he could have been 4 of 8 from the field, right? And that's great. That means he's pulled his head in. It means he hasn't taken these bad shots. But if he's 4 of 15. That actually causes you to lose. It's not about, I don't think it's about him shooting well to make you win. It's about him not shooting badly to make you not lose. And again, they sound the same, but they are very different in my mind. I don't think that him shooting 50% drives you to win. I think that him avoiding shooting poorly and avoiding shooting in big amounts avoids you losing. And again, it is a mindset thing. And the worry I have is that money. Now, I've put out projected Rockets lineups, and I had Dillon Brooks in the starting lineup, as you do. We'll get to that later. And people go, what do you mean? Brooks isn't going to start? He's going to come off the bench for sure. Like, there's no way that it's going to happen on this team. I just want to talk about Fred VanVleet quickly for a second. It's a big contract. He's a good player. Yes, they drafted a point guard, all that sort of stuff. But I don't think anyone really should have any problems with VanVleet on that contract. He gets the younger players into better positions. And I think that this Rockets offseason would have been universally praised, Jackson, if they just didn't bring in Dillon Brooks. Because what Brooks does is he limits Amen Thompson, he limits Tari Eason, he possibly limits Alperen Sengun. I know they play different positions, but he possibly limits him. He limits the value of Kevin Porter Jr. not playing point guard, which is not Kevin Porter's preferred or best position. And he's just like an extra body in there that's going to take up these minutes. It could go to many of these other guys that is going to sort of create, I don't know if it creates issues. We're going to talk about Kevin Porter a little bit later on, but it's a spot where he's in there, he's got these minutes, and there's a flow-on effect to 4 or 5 different guys on the team.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I will say, just on your point about VanVleet, I mean, he absolutely fantastic signing. I think it ultimately made a lot of sense. The Rockets could have very easily brought James Harden back, and we're watching that entire situation unfold now with the 76ers and Daryl Morey and just that whole just it's a lot right now, right? So you look at VanVleet, and he is so much more of a flexible piece to bring in because he can be played. He can set the table for the offense. He can have the ball in his hands and be effective that way. He's a guy that can space the floor and be just as effective without the basketball in his hands. So he's somebody that you can conceivably see getting time running alongside Ime Thompson, right? Where you let him kind of run that second unit, but VanVleet is out there almost like the safety net, right? The training wheels, while Ime Thompson is getting used to running an actual NBA offense, really providing, some, what I'm imagining is going to be some 5-out spacing with some of those second units for the Rockets to really maximize what Ime Thompson does well. I do agree. I mean, I think there are a lot of concerns with Dillon Brooks for sure, but I have to imagine that in a world where Ime Udoka has talked consistently about the fact that guys are going to have to earn their playing time, they're going to have to fight for the minutes that they get. I think it's just going to harbor an environment of competitiveness where nothing is going to be given at this point on this Rockets team. And if Dillon Brooks is struggling offensively, or if he can't buy in to the vision or the role that Ime Udoka and the Rockets organization have for him, if he's taking bad shots, if he is a detriment offensively and other guys are struggling because of it, the spacing is bad for Jalen and Ime Thompson, Alperen Sengun is getting collapsed on all the time because defenses aren't honoring Dillon Brooks from the perimeter, that kind of thing, then we might see a world where his minutes get reduced pretty quickly out of the gate. I don't think that's completely out of the realm of possibility.
And he wasn't like he played 35 minutes a night in Memphis. He was like a 28, 29-minute-a-night player. And I do think that would end up being a better course of action. But I don't want to talk too much about Dillon Brooks here. We are going to get into some other stuff in a second. But I've got to tell you, first of all, that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Football season is about to kick off. Well, no, it's not. It's already kicked off. Preseason is here. We are not that far away from the regular season. And FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you get bonus bets for every victory. Now, Jackson, I wouldn't suggest that putting a Super Bowl winning bet on CJ Stroud and the Texans is going to garner you a huge amount of bonus bets. Probably doesn't seem like a winning play to get the most out of FanDuel here, does it?
No, not particularly, Josh. But if you want to, test the waters a little bit, maybe get a little bit risky with your money, go for it.
Yeah, what I would do is I would be putting the putting my Super Bowl winner bet on a good team. Maybe it's the Miami Dolphins. Or you look at the Philadelphia 76ers, Philadelphia Eagles, you look at the Chiefs, and then you can grab those bonus bets because every regular season victory that team gets, you get the bonus bets. And then maybe chuck a couple of those on CJ Stroud for Rookie of the Year. Maybe you look at Dameon Pierce to do some over-unders in his rushing yards each week. You can use it on spreads and money lines and over-unders and player props and all that sort of stuff. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. Also, don't forget that these FanDuel ads are a great way of me flexing my knowledge of NFL players, which is very marginal, but I can throw a name out. It makes it look like I know what I'm talking about.
No comment on Tank Dell, though. I'm so disappointed, Josh.
Tank Dell, the most overrated player in preseason. Is that the guy you mean?
There we go.
I know about that one. All right. Injuries on this team. Ime Thompson sprained his ankle in Summer League. It was like a 2 to 3 week injury, apparently. So we look like we're all ready to go. Now, there's nothing else that I'm missing there in terms of players entering the offseason injured.
Entering the offseason injured, no, although you did just mention Jock Landale a few moments ago, so I don't know if we need to update him on the list or what, but there's, I think, some concern there with how bad that ankle injury looked, that he might not be ready for the start of the season at this point.
Yeah, he's not going to the World Cup, I believe. He sprained his ankle pretty badly last night. Now, this show's coming out about 4 or 5 days after that, so in the exhibition game against South Sudan last night, Landale, who didn't play, I don't think, in the first 2 exhibition games, came in, started, and sprained his ankle, and looks like he won't be at the World Cup, and yeah, it looked like at least a 3 to 4 weeker, if not more. It didn't look particularly good. So he was going to be, or he probably still will be, in the rotation as a backup center. But that does bring us to lineups, Jackson, because this is your projected starting lineup. It is identical to mine: Fred VanVleet, Dillon Brooks, Jalen Green, Jabari Smith Jr., and Alperen Sengun. Again, I don't really see any debate there. When I put my lineup out, I had many people say, well, what are you talking about? Kevin Porter Jr. is definitely starting. or people said, no, Dillon Brooks is going to start at power forward and Jabari Smith will come off the bench. Like, I think he got less than 1% chance of it being anything different to this outside of injury.
Yeah, no, completely agree with you there, Josh. Look, at this point, you look at the starting lineup, and I think the three most absolute surefire locks in the starting lineup are going to be VanVleet, Brooks, and Alperen Sengun, right? Those three guys, the two veterans, they were brought in, right? You went out, you got those guys. You're going to start them. You're bringing them in to have that veteran established voice on the floor, the extensions of Ime Udoka for these young guys to help kind of steady the ship, so to speak. And then Alperen Sengun, nobody else does what he does on the roster, right? He's the most unique player on the entire Rockets roster. So those three guys are absolute locks for their starting roles. I do think there is a very marginally slim chance that the two positions that are kind of up for grabs at this point, Jalen Green at the 2 guard and then Jabari Smith Jr. At the power forward spot, there's going to be competition for those spots because you do have Kevin Porter Jr., who is now being relocated into what will more than likely be his new role as the Rockets' 6th man off the bench. And then you have Tari Eason, who outplayed Jabari Smith Jr. for much of their rookie seasons last year. If that's at all the case going into training camp and exiting training camp, where maybe KPJ is just completely outplaying Jalen Green or Tari Eason is completely outplaying Jabari Smith Jr., the way that Ime Udoka has talked about this being kind of a meritocracy, right, where the best player is going to play, you have to earn your minutes, earn your keep. I would not be shocked if one of those two guys actually overtook the projected starters in Jalen or Jabari. However, again, I'm going to give that like a sub 2% chance in the grand scheme of things actually happening. But we've seen crazier because we saw Bruno Fernando take the starting spot over Alperen Sengun last year.
Don't do that shit to me. Come on, man.
Dude, hey, I lived it, Josh, man. It was insane, okay? I lived it, and I saw Rockets fans want to go down and storm Toyota Center like it was January 6th because they wanted to make sure that Alperen Sengun was starting, and they started Bruno freaking Fernando over him, okay? Yeah, I have that PTSD, okay?
That was pretty rough. Now, this is the genesis of one of my... Now, I make a lot of shit takes. I do a lot of stuff on Twitter. I say stuff, but this was one of the shittest takes that I had, and I'm gonna blame you for it, Jackson, because we were here at Summer League. We were having this exact discussion, and we're talking about starting lineups. You go, yeah, we'll see. Look, I think those three are locked in, and Jalen might be battled by Kevin Porter, and Jabari might be battled by Tari. And they have to see, we'll see what happens if Tari goes out and outplayed him. And then we watched the first half of that Rocket Summer League game, and Jabari Smith looked disgusting. Like, what is this guy doing? He's not interested. The shots aren't going in. He's completely disengaged, and Tari Eason was dominating. And I turned to you and I went, is this the sort of thing you mean by if Tari Eason outplays Jabari Smith? And then, of course, he went on and dropped about 100 points in the next 3 halves of basketball and made me look... Basically, as soon as I tweeted it, Jabari Smith went off for like 30 points and a half and made me look completely stupid. But all that does show that Tari Eason was excellent through all of those games that he played in Summer League, and Jabari Smith just looked better in those 3 halves. But Eason was still really good. And what I think that this also leads to a problem is that we know that... Well, I was going to talk about this later, but we'll do it now. The Ime Udoka is a big-time defensive guy, right? Loves his defense, loves defense. Went to the 2 bigs in Boston straight away. Rob and Al started those guys together. How's that going to work? When Al had struggled in Philadelphia, well, it worked perfectly in Boston. My worry here is that Alperen Sengun is not a very good defender. He's not necessarily a terrible one, but he's not a very good one. His strength comes offensively. His strength comes from passing, and we saw that when Kevin Porter was out last season, Sengun's numbers and production took off. He looked awesome in that role as a main distributor. It's going to be a little bit harder for him to do that with the men and with Fred and with Porter and all those guys still there. And I'm getting to a point here eventually, but what I am getting to is that if Sengun's defense isn't there and Tari Eason is still continuing to ball out, what is the likelihood of Eason and Smith playing a ton of minutes together at the 4 and the 5 and Sengun being once again limited as a 27, 28 minute a night type of player versus a guy that has to push into that 33 minute a night role?
So I've got 2 responses for you on this, Josh. I'll start with the idea of Jabari and Tari kind of taking a lot of minutes at the 4 and the 5 spot. First off, that's absolutely something we're going to be seeing a lot of this upcoming season. After talking with a couple guys with the Rockets organization at Summer League, being at a couple practices, one thing that I was told is that to expect a lot of Jabari Smith Jr. at the 5 is that Ime Udoka is really excited about the possibility of and the defensive versatility that is provided by running Jabari at the 5. Allows a lot of flexibility, allows a lot of switching, all of that. And we saw Jabari at the 5 in spurts this past season. Yep. And it's kind of weird because coming out of college, I thought he was going to be like a 4-3 tweener, like a Harrison Barnes type. And after his rookie season and seeing the way that he plays in Summer League and just kind of becoming more accustomed to his style, I think I'm starting to slowly realize he's more of a 4 or 5 tweener is what he really is. And I fully expect there's going to be a lot of minutes kind of divvied up in the backup minutes behind Alperen Sengun. Say he gets his 26 to 30 minutes a night, give or take. I think the majority of the rest of those minutes, the 20-something left over, are going to be divided on any given night. I think we're going to see a lot of Jabari Smith Jr. at the 5, anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes there for Jabari of his minutes. And then maybe it's Jock Landale one night, maybe it's Jeff Green one night. They're going to kind of have like this revolving door of who's going to play the minutes of the 5 based on matchup and who's got it going and all that kind of stuff. But we are absolutely going to see a lot of Jabari at the 5 with Tari at the 4 because the Rockets are very excited about the defensive potency of that lineup. The other side of what you said, though, about Alperen Sengun and his defensive limitations, essentially, it sucks because last year, like, the Rockets were just abhorrent, the entire team. Like their perimeter defense was Swiss cheese, and at the end of the day, what happens is we have this understanding, right? The center, the big man, the guy who's down low is kind of your last line of defense, if you will, for most NBA defenses.
Fix everything.
Whoever, yeah. And when you have to fix everything and everything's already kind of crap, like, it's going to make him look worse by default. So I don't think Alp's actually as bad a defender as he's looked maybe through 2 years of his NBA career.
I agree with that.
I think the big thing for him is going to be how creative can Ime Udoka get with him defensively. And my comp for maybe I will rival one of your crappy takes here, Josh. My comp for Alperen Sengun and how effective I think he can be defensively is actually similar to an old Al Horford. Because you look at their physicals and you look at the way that they move on the floor. Al Horford isn't this like insane, like, physical phenom. He's 6'9", 7'1" wingspan. Alperen Sengun, there's rumors that he grew a little bit this offseason, so maybe he's 6'10", maybe 6'11" now, give or take, whatever. He's got a 7-foot wingspan, so their measurements are about the same. Al Horford's definitely a little bit more light on his feet and a bit more mobile as a big, but I don't think it's like this drastic difference between the two when you compare, again, old Al Horford right now, this day and age, to current Alperen Sengun. I think that players that have that ability to process the game at a level faster than most other guys on the floor, high basketball IQ, good instincts, quick hands, all those little things that are harder to kind of quantify. I think players like that can make an impact defensively, but you need to be a little bit more creative in how you go about doing it. And we saw Ime Udoka got creative in Boston, right? He decided he was going to run with the double bigs with Al and Rob, and it worked. It worked wonders, right? We even saw Joe Mazzulla at times reverting back to that lineup because that's what they were comfortable with in Boston and being able to make their impact defensively using that double big lineup. Another kind of like spicy take that I have going into the season is I think there might be a world where we might see at times any two of the three of Sengun, Jock Landale, and Jeff Green actually sharing the floor with one another. You look at the depth chart and you would just assume, okay, Sengun, Jock Landale, and Jeff Green's like your third string, like stretch 5, big man, whatever. Maybe he plays some minutes at the 4. I think there's a world where Ime Udoka and his affinity for running multiple bigs at the same time might actually see a world where Jock Landale and Alperen Sengun can coexist on the floor together. We're watching in FIBA action currently. Alperen Sengun's playing for Turkey, and he's playing next to Omer Yurtseven and one of the Turkish players, Sertaç Sanli. And he's playing the 4, essentially, next to those guys for the Turkish team. So there is a world where you can play him in tandem with another big and find success on both sides of the floor doing it.
That would be interesting to see whether he's able to get onto the court with some other bigs. I think he's an unbelievably strong talent. He's still really young, which we're going to get to in a second. The defensive stuff, I agree, is overblown. He's got really quick hands. He's got smart hands. He just can be a little bit slow out on the perimeter, and his rim protection is not awesome, but it's not terrible, and he can easily survive. It's going to be whether Udoka believes that and how he wants to use him, whether he prefers those other guys. So while I think to me, Sengun has one of the biggest like deltas in outcomes for this season. He could actually blow up under Udoka, and they lean into him, and he starts putting up insane numbers, or Udoka just has it in his head that he can't get by with the defense, and he's got those two other options. And that's always the thing. There's other options. It's not like he doesn't have anyone else. He can go Jabari and Tari. He can try Jock Landale for a little bit there. He can limit that to see what happens, and that leads to that change in expected outcomes. What I've got up on the screen here now are the players on this roster who are under the age of 23. Jalen's 21, Jabari's only 20, Sengun's 21, Eason's 22, Amen is 20, and Cam Whitmore is 19. And people would have noticed on that last page, and I didn't even talk about it, which I should have, that was bad. bad from me to not talk about who you had in your rotation. You had Amen Thompson, Kevin Porter, Jayshawn Tate, Tari Eason, and Jock Landale as the other 5 bench players. They'll notice that Cam Whitmore is not amongst that group. Now, Cam Whitmore, of course, was the Summer League MVP. Jackson, you may argue whether that was deserved or not. I'll argue that it wasn't, but he did play well. He did play well in some games when a lot of those guys sat out. But it is going to be hard for him to find minutes and touches because Thompson, Porter, Eason, I think are all going to be clearly ahead of him. And then it's Jayshawn Tate, who I would argue that is a solid enough rotation player, but I don't know how much sense he makes to be getting minutes consistently. But Whitmore also probably just isn't ready for regular minutes in the NBA.
He's just not. He's so raw. You look at, and I will say, as far as like the summer league performance, right? It's just one of those things where it was so hard to deny the counting stats because he played all the games, whereas other guys were shut down earlier on, right? And so it became one of those things where he won summer league MVP because he was just there and putting up the numbers, right?
He got 8 steals in one game as well. That helps.
Yeah, he had the ultimate green light. He had some really strong performances for sure, but it was just kind of like the sheer volume of it, right? But he looked really raw during summer league, right? He just turned 19. He is a fresh 19, right? It's not like he's been 19 for a while. He just turned 19 years old. He's very clearly a guy that I think is going to be given the ultimate green light, send him down to the G League, let him get those reps, and then bring him back up maybe at the mid-season point when he's gotten a ton of run in with the G League guys, and then maybe he'll break into the rotation in the second half of the season, possibly. The Rockets are an organization that are very internally high on Jayshawn Tate. They believe that he is a winning basketball player, that he impacts winning at a very, very high level, and I very much have had to argue with Rockets fans and be like, no, he's going to be a part of the rotation. You need to stop putting Cam Whitmore in your depth chart behind Dillon Brooks. That's not happening. Jayshawn Tate's going to get his 10 to 15, maybe 20 minutes a night, give or take, on that wing rotation for the Rockets. So yeah, Cam Whitmore, he's not going to be there on opening night. He's not going to suit up on opening night. I doubt it unless it's garbage time minutes or something to that effect. He's just not ready for it, unfortunately, at this point. He needs a long runway to get that development time. And because the Rockets are kind of a team that are trying to balance being developmentally focused with the young core, the 6 names that we have on the screen right now, as well as wanting to win more games this season and be more competitive and hopefully make a play in, they can't really afford the endless runway that they had these last 2 to 3 years to just trot out rookies and young guys and let them make mistakes and let them, kind of trial by fire, learn by doing the way that they were with Steven Silas.
So what is the biggest difference that Ime Udoka brings to this team?
He brings them a leader. I really think they were rudderless for the last 2 to 3 years. He brings them a leader. He brings them somebody who's going to have a clear kind of voice, a clear identity that he wants to establish for this team. We know that he's kind of this, gritty defense first guy, preaches a lot of unselfish basketball. We saw how he got Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown to buy into being more unselfish as star players, kind of elevating their play by elevating the play of their teammates, right? Making them better, or getting them to buy in on the defensive side of the basketball, getting them to become better playmakers, kind of turning the Celtics around after that rough start to that year where he was, the one and done head coach year for him in Boston. Things weren't pretty to start that season. I don't know if a lot of people remember that or how that season went. Yeah, it looked bad. And then he got, it takes some time sometimes for coaches to get the buy-in from their players. But at the end of the day, I think head coaching, specifically the head coaching role, is so much less about the X's and O's element, because there's only so many ways you can skin a cat, right? There's only so many ways you can run a pick and roll. I think Greg Popovich mentioned it during his Hall of Fame induction speech, right? It's just X's and O's are X's and O's. They're the same. You can only draw them up so many different ways. It's about the relationships aspect. And you saw Popovich talking about that during his induction speech, and that's exactly what Ime Udoka has, spoken about relentlessly as a disciple of the Greg Popovich coaching tree, is how important those relationships are and how important it is to be able to get the most out of your players by resonating with them, right? Understanding who they are as human beings, as people, and fostering an environment where they can, they can grow and they can develop, but also not being afraid to challenge them, call guys out. I think that's exactly what he's going to bring. With Steven Silas, I've heard him at times, internally compared to, it was like, having a youth pastor around, where he was friendly, he was nice, he was all good vibes, but he wasn't really challenging anybody there. And, I do think, maybe one day Steven will get another chance as a head coach with another organization, but Ime brings them a leader. They haven't had a leader. Some teams have a leader in their most talented player. Sometimes a player comes in like a Ja Morant, a Luka, whoever, And that's just your guy. You're like, okay, that's our leader. Awesome. Other times you need the leader to be on the sidelines. You need the leader to be the coach. Maybe it's a Greg Popovich or a Carlisle or whoever it is. And the Rockets now have that voice in the locker room, and they've got extensions of that voice in Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks to help kind of cement what Ime Udoka wants to establish in Houston.
Who's a breakout candidate on this team?
Alperen Sengun, absolutely. I mean, he's a guy. You look at what he's doing currently overseas in FIBA action.
Crazy.
I mean, he on any given night he could give you 20, 10, and 5 in his sleep. It just depends on how much they want to feature him offensively. And I am cautiously optimistic that Ime Udoka is. I know that Udoka is excited. We've chatted about it a little bit. That he's excited about Sengun's passing ability, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how he kind of unleashes him offensively. Because with the Silas regime, they basically painted him into a corner. They were like, we want you to do this. We want you to be a rim running big. And basically that's it. We don't want to lean into your passing ability. We don't want to lean into your deep offensive bag. We don't want to do anything special with you. We want you to be a rim running big, set screens, roll hard to the rim. That's it. And that is just a complete disservice to him at that point and what he brings to the basketball court. So if Ime Udoka can lean into that creativity a little bit, we see more of him kind of being an offensive hub, an offensive fulcrum, if you will, for this Rockets team. I think there's absolutely a world where he puts up 20, 10, and 5 and is maybe even flirting with the idea of becoming an all-star this next season, legitimately. He's
got this huge upside. I know. My problem more is that just the uncertainty around how Udoka uses him. But yeah, I think the talent's clearly there. We saw it on display many times, and you mentioned the way that he was misused by Silas so many times, which caused a lot of problems with his overall production. So it's not a make or break season, but it is a very interesting season to see where the direction that Sengun goes. What about on the other side, a regression candidate? It is hard to regress from where this team was last season, where they were one of the worst, two worst teams in the NBA. But is there anyone you could see maybe taking somewhat of a step back? I think, well, actually, there's one pretty obvious answer.
I think it's Kevin Porter Jr.
Yeah.
I think you have to look at KPJ, and that's one of the other biggest storylines rolling into the season is how does he accept this, more than likely this role where he has been the head honcho as he anointed himself, and he's been the leader. Again, this was a team that was devoid of any type of actual leadership because everybody was so young. Nobody was ready to accept responsibility for this team. Jalen's incredibly young. Jabari's incredibly young. So I don't fault Kevin Porter Jr. for accepting that role, being a bit older than the other young guys on the team, and the team not having a leader. The one veteran presence they had in Eric Gordon, not exactly the vocal veteran leadership presence that you would want on a team full of basically guys fresh out of AAU basketball. So, but for him, he's going to be in a smaller role coming off the bench. He's going to be the sixth man for the team more than likely. How does he accept that role, and does he thrive in that role? It's weird because it's kind of this double-edged sword where I think that in this new role, being the sixth man and not having the pressures of setting the table and figuring out, okay, am I playmaking? Am I creating for my teammates right now? Or am I in scoring mode? And that you saw that internal struggle with him all of last season where there were games where he was just a playmaker and he looked fantastic. And then there were games where he was just a scorer and he looked fantastic. But then there were games where he was struggling to kind of get both roles to coexist in one player, one body. And that's where he had some difficulties. I think there's a lot of optimism, or I have a lot of optimism in him sliding back into more of his natural role, a dynamic two guard coming off the bench. He can create as a secondary facilitator offensively, but he's not tasked with setting everybody up. Just go out there, get buckets. He could also be a breakout candidate. That's kind of the crazy thing is I don't know if his numbers would necessarily jump higher than they were last year. He got better. The efficiency was better last season, but you might actually get a version of Kevin Porter Jr. that is more of a winning or impactful player in this role with lesser numbers, but the role fits him better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the numbers should regress, but he was really good last season. He was one of the most. It was probably him and Sengun were the two best players on this team, and there is a lot of shit that gets thrown Kevin Porter's way, which some of it is deserved, some of it isn't. But I thought he did show significant improvements last season. The problem is they, and rightfully so, they don't believe that he's a point guard of the future, and they signed one and then they drafted one. So that does make it a little bit hard to see where that fits. But as you mentioned earlier, maybe he is the shooting guard, and maybe he is the guy, because Jalen Green has had some issues at times with efficiency. Who is the most likely player to be traded on this team?
Most likely to be traded, I'm going to have to sit there and go with Jayshawn Tate for a lot of the reasons that you kind of pointed out before. He's just, he is a guy that on a team trying to win titles, trying to, have a deep playoff push. I think he can be a very quality, like 7th, 8th man on a team, kind of a Swiss Army knife, ultimate utility man. The only thing he can't do on a basketball court is shoot. But he does everything else so well. He can drive, he can dish, he can defend. He fouls quite a bit because he's a very aggressive defender. But that just kind of comes with the territory, right? Sometimes, those really good defenders, the really physical defenders do foul quite a bit. Dillon Brooks fouls a ton, and he's an all-NBA caliber defender. So I think he's the guy that you look at, depending on progression from guys like Tari Eason, like Cam Whitmore, that mid-season point, if they can fetch like a first-round draft pick or something for Jayshawn Tate from a team that's trying to make the playoffs, then he's a guy that's on a team-friendly deal. It could very easily be shipped out if they think other people are ready to step into those minutes.
All right, let's go to the win total for the season. Last year, they were 22-60. They had the 29th best net rating. That's second worst net rating, negative 8.6. FanDuel's got them up at 31.5. It's a big, big jump. And you've gone even bigger. You've gone to 37-45, which is a huge jump. 15 wins. I don't even know how often that's ever happened in an NBA season. I jumped them up 7. I thought, okay. That's a big jump, but you've gone even higher than that. And I do think that they are undoubtedly better. I don't think that you can really debate about that. I still just have some concerns about how big a jump you can take in one season. Plus, I also know that if you're winning 15 extra games, that means 15 extra losses need to come across other teams in the NBA, especially in the Western Conference. And I'm not really sure where that comes from, Jackson, but that is an optimistic view. Is that a play-in team to you?
Yeah, Josh, look, I know I might have gone a little overboard with the 37-45 prediction, the 37 wins, but I think there's a lot of, I feel like I have a lot of sound logic and reasoning to back this up, because you look at the Rockets team of last season, right? There was a ton of talent on that roster, and I think relative to expectations, they actually underperformed last year. You looked at how the Rockets and Thunder looked at the beginning of last season. I think a lot of teams might have been able to make the argument that the Rockets, pound for pound, were a more talented team top to bottom than the Thunder. Now, obviously, Shea took a massive leap last year, became a top 10 player in the NBA. That helped quite a bit in their push to make the playoffs ultimately. But they were kind of held back by the previous coaching staff, I think. So you elevate the coaching staff by adding what some people believe is a top 5 head coach in Ime Udoka to an exciting, young, talented team. Then you go out, you get the veteran additions in Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks. And then you also add in and sprinkle in a little what you hope is the internal development of guys like Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason. If those guys can all take moderate steps forward, or if even one or two of them take massive year 2 or year 3 leaps, then I think you're absolutely looking at a team that can jump anywhere from 10 to 15 wins, which is exactly kind of that ballpark range of 37-45.
Let's play a game. Let's do a grid game here for the Rockets, Jackson. We're going to compare Rockets players, Rockets and Pelicans, Rockets Spurs, Rockets Sixers, Rockets Wizards, Rockets Kings, and the last one is a player for the Rockets who averaged 5 assists per game. Now, of course, it is only you that is playing, so there is no rarity score versus the general public, but I am going to grade you in a certain way, and that compares you to your other hosts. And what it is we're looking at games played between the two franchises. We look at what they played for either franchise. I choose the smaller number, and then I rank all those on a scale of 0 to 100. So if they played 400 for the Rockets and 2 for the Pelicans, it counts as a 2, and then it gets graded against everyone else. If they played 2 for the Rockets and 400 for the Pelicans, that also counts as a 2. So and then for the 5 assists per game, they have to have averaged 5 assists per game in the games that they played for the Rockets in a season, and then we grade that based on fewest career games for Houston. Does that all make sense?
Perfectly not confusing.
All right, let's go. Where are we choosing? Which one do you want to go with first?
I already know where I'm going first. I'm gonna do the 5 assists per game first.
Okay.
Let me do John Wall.
Ooh, John Wall. Is that a good answer? Let me have a quick look. John Wall.
It has to be a good answer. It has to be a good answer.
It is a good answer. He did average 5 assists per game. He only played 40 games for the Rockets, so John Wall gets you a great score of 3.51. Like the grid games, we're always looking for the low score here, so you get a 3.51. The best score you could have got was the 5 games that Kyrie Thomas played for the Rockets a few years ago.
Kyrie Thomas. Oh, what a throwback.
You could have gone the 15 games of Dennis Schroeder. You could have gone the 20 games of Victor Oladipo. They all averaged 5 assists per game. You could have even gone back to the 50 games that Scottie Pippen played. He averaged 5 assists in a season as well. But John Wall's a good answer. All right, where are we going to go next?
I gotta use this guy. He's my sleeper pick all the time. And I love doing the grid games. I'm going Chris Chiozza for Rockets Wizards.
Wow. Chris Chiozza. I believe he's a Warriors legend as well. Chris Chiozza. Oh, wow. Now, how many games did you reckon he played for both of those franchises?
I think it was like less than 10 for the Rockets, right? Like 8 or something? Or is he the
you are very
under
good.
10 one?
He played 7 for the Rockets.
Okay, there we go. I knew it's like a handful.
7 for the Rockets and 10 for the Wizards. So that is amazing to be able to go to that one. All right, what else have we got?
Let me see. So we got Pels, Spurs, Sixers, Kings. Spurs Rockets. I'm gonna go Spurs Rockets next.
All right. Here we go.
If I take a guess and I get it wrong, does it?
It's an automatic 100 on that. You wipe out. And remember, they have to have played in.
I know
regular
that's why
season.
I'm trying to. You know what? Okay, let's risk it for the biscuit because I know. I think he did. Damari Carroll.
Ooh, yes, that is very good as well. Although it's not the best score you could have got, but it's not far off. Damari Carroll gets you a 4.3 because he played 14 games in Houston. He played 15 games in San Antonio. All right.
That was the bubble year that the Rockets picked him up going into the bubble. And I was struggling to remember if he actually played for the Spurs, but I was like, he was with San Antonio right before. Okay, cool. Awesome.
Let's see. Another one he could have got was the 3 games that Donatas Montiunas played for the Spurs too. It would have been a good one.
Oh, wow. That's
I don't remember that happening, but apparently it did.
I don't either. That's throwing me off. Also, I was like, I feel like, did T-Mac play for the Spurs?
Well, this is the thing. That's why he only played in the playoffs, I think. I don't think he got a regular season game going for the Spurs. I'm going to double check
we go.
that, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
I think I tried that the other day on a grid game and it didn't count, and that's what was upsetting me. I was like, T-Mac should count for Rocket Spurs. Okay.
T-Mac played 6 games for the Spurs in the playoffs, but no regular season games. There you go.
Okay. All right. Let's go with another grid legend here because I can't think of any. Well, I can think of a lot of Rockets Pelicans names, but they're all going to have played too many games, I think. Eric Gordon, Ryan Anderson, like so many different names. I'm going to go with Ish Smith, though. Let me go with Ish Smith for Rockets Pels.
That is a grid game legend, Ish Smith. Let's see what Ish Smith's score is. Ish Smith is 11.82. He played 28 for the Rockets and 27 for the Pelicans. So that's a pretty good score. There was a legendary one in there that I just saw on my list. Omri Caspi played 1 game for the Pelicans. So that would have been a good one.
Oh, Caspi. Oh, man.
What about Pops Mensah Bonsu, who played 4 games for the Rockets and 7 for the Pelicans? James Nunnally. Remember that guy? 2 games for the Rockets and 9 for the Pelicans. Okay, there you go.
Oh, that would have been good. Oh, man. Okay.
And who remembers the 3 games that Josh Smith played for the Pelicans? I don't.
Josh Smith played for the Pelicans?
Well, apparently he did. I don't remember when that happened. It must. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know when that happened. But apparently, I'm looking that up because that doesn't sound right. Let me have a look. Josh Smith played, here you go, in 17-18, 3 games for the Pelicans. He went to China for the year before, came back and played 3 games for the Pelicans, 4 minutes a game, 12 minutes total for his career in the Pelicans. All right, we got the Kings, we got the Sixers.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Sixers, and I'm gonna tip my hat to you, Josh, because I'm going with James Nunnally. I'm cheating a little bit here. I'm cheating a little bit here. Thank you for reminding me about James Nunnally's existence because I know that he played for the Sixers, and that one was gonna be a tough one for me. So
wow, yes, okay. I'm just trying to provide entertainment to people by bringing up funny names. And now you're using it against
I'm
me.
competitive, man. I'm going to metagame this just a little bit.
James Nunnally, 0.28. Wow. He wasn't the lowest score. Let's find out who the actual lowest score was in that list. Where is the lowest score in that list? It's hiding. There are a lot of players who have barely played in this list. I can't even find who the 0 is. Oh, the 0 was some guy by the name of Josh Davis. I know who that is. He played 1 game for the Rockets and 42 for the Sixers. All right, Kings.
Josh Davis.
Yeah, no idea who that is. Kings is the last one. What are we doing here?
Let me think. Rockets, Kings.
They have a lot of options here. 76 players between the 2 franchises. And a lot of guys I've never heard of.
I'm blanking on his first name. It's not. It's not Terrence. Troy Williams, not Terrence Williams. Troy Williams.
Wow, man, this is an unbelievably good score from you, Jackson. Troy Williams is correct. He played 10 games for Houston. He played 21 for Sacramento, and I would say, I don't have the list in front of me, but I would say that's going to put you in the lead amongst all the hosts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Garrett Temple would have gotten you a slightly better score by one game. Luke Marmute played 9 games for Sacramento. I do remember that one happening. Who else is on this list that would have been interesting? Hilton Armstrong. There you go. 6 games for Hilton Armstrong for the Kings and 9 for the Rockets. And that,
wow,
after all of our technical difficulties, we got through it, Jackson. We're here. We're at the end. Tell people what's going on over at Locked On Rockets.
Locked On Rockets, we are trucking through the offseason. We got a ton of creative content over there, doing some deep dives on the newest additions to the Rockets, Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks, some crossovers across the Locked On network. So that's always a ton of fun. Doing some fun, offseason content, all-time drafts, that kind of thing. So be sure to tune in over there. It's always a ton of fun talking Houston Rockets basketball. I appreciate you having me on, Josh.
Awesome, Jackson. Thank you again for coming on. And that'll do it for me today. Follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app and on YouTube. Thumb it up and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.